Hey everyone, welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, and we are back in the saddle once again for another season. And this episode is brought to you by my friend Preston Poulter's book, Palace of the Golden Princess, which offers a fun, sexy romp through a fantasy RPG setting run by women. Issue 3 launches soon on Kickstarter, and right now Preston's doing me a pretty cool favor where he's offering a free PDF of issue 1 if they sign up for the email at pocketjackcomics.com and sign up for his email list. You will get that first issue you can try before you buy. So definitely check that out. And enough about that, though, because I have with me comic creator Aaron Dowen. And no, I am not calling you the Count of Monte Cristo. That is not happening. You are Aaron to me, and we're going to stick it that way. If I've blown your cover, I'm sorry.
It's been my moniker for, I don't know, 2.5 years, 3 years now. I think ever since like the first time I was on a show, I did the Count of Monte Cristo, and most people don't know what it is anyway, so it's worked for me.
I mean, it's a drink, right? It's a drink, right? Completely. Right? It's like an alcohol.
I guess it could be a drink. I know it's a sandwich. It's got ham and Swiss cheese and jam. But no, beyond that, it's my favorite book and one of my favorite movies.
I've never read the book. I don't think I've seen the movie.
It's pretty twisted.
But I would imagine it's like an American classic, right?
Well, it's I guess technically he wasn't French, British. It had to do with, he may have been Italian. Alexander Dumas was the writer, who most people know from Three Musketeers or Man in the Iron Mask, but this was his other big thing. And what's fascinating about it was actually journals. It wasn't a book originally. It was entries into publication, like a periodical publication, and then he turned it into a book. So and it's baller. I mean, if you're into revenge stories, that's one of the best revenge stories that's ever been written.
Well, I mean, we could probably talk about that all day, and who knows, maybe I'll write my own. But I do want to talk about your Kickstarter, which is more important, which is something you've written and worked on, and that is Tilt, because that is volume 1. And I know there's been at least 3 issues that have come out before this. I don't know if you did a Kickstarter for the 4th one or if it's included a graphic novel.
Yeah, so issue 4 came out, I don't know, beginning of last year or something. The studio Catalyst, we've been kind of pulled back for a long time now. We did one other campaign since then, I think. That was One Last Job issue 2. But this is the first time they're actually putting everything together as a trade. And all of the issues have been remastered as far as lettering.
So we're going to talk about that, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to catch everybody up on what is Tilt exactly, because there's people who have not heard of this, and obviously your studio, and you've been putting this book out, not every single month, but it's every few months, and I know you've taken a bit of a break here and there, and so some people are probably hearing about Tilt for the very first time. So what is Tilt before we go any further?
So Tilt is a story about a man named Patrick Itil. He is a Bostonian, born and raised. And when he was a teenager, he was taken by this secretive organization called the Council of Elders. And they did a whole bunch of experiments on him and started using him as a trained mercenary. And that was when he was 15. So he finally gets the chance to break out. And when he does, he's still kind of in that 15-year-old mindset, so he doesn't know how to talk to girls. Which is hilarious because once we see him again, he's in his 30s. So we get to play a bit of... He's also kind of like unaware of how beefcakey he is. So we get to play off of that quite a bit as well. It was really a story that came about as a bunch of extra notes from another comic that we put out called Paradigm. I had all these extra notes from character development, world development, and I was like, man, you could probably make those a cool character. What ended up happening was Tilt became... by far our most popular read, particularly with people that don't like superhero stories. I guess because it has a different vibe, a different feel. It is gritty and it has a lot of heart. And I think the kind of the quips and the fourth wall breaking are what drew a lot of people in.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about this story, because obviously he gets taken, is sort of being used as a weapon in certain ways, and he figures out a way how to escape. Obviously, he gets back into the city, and he wants revenge, and he wants to stop the Council of Elders. And they sort of know he's alive. They sort of don't know he's alive. He winds up meeting somebody who sort of took him, and that guy is playing, both sides a little bit. And then I think that guy's girlfriend or his assistant is also somewhere in the mix. And obviously, a former friend is in there as well. And so it's very interesting because there's a lot of pieces on the
Yeah.
chessboard,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of different sides being analyzed. And so, what is that like too? Because it can go on forever, technically,
Yeah.
and you don't know what's going to happen here or there. And it's pretty interesting because there's a lot of different angles and a lot of different gears being turned.
Right. I mean, it's been fun to develop. I wrote them all 4 issues at the same time, and this was a few years back. I knew the story that I wanted to tell, and it kind of just flowed out. And what I didn't expect was that people would identify and click with Exquisite and Cindy quite as much as they did. I thought they would be pretty decent side characters, but I didn't understand that people would actually be like, dude, Exquisite's the man, and like, actually vibe with him to the level that they have. Which made me include him just a little bit more when I did some rewrites for like the 4th issue. And then if we get to continue it at some point, then there's a bigger story for him. But having all those pieces means I get to play in my own little sandbox quite a bit more. We have, a billionaire who owns a whole bunch of different stuff. Cindy is a research and developer, which means she probably has met the guy named Ben from Paradigm, because he's in R&D as well, just in Charlotte, North Carolina, rather than in Boston. And so we haven't gotten to the point where any of them have interacted as far as we know. But we do know that something happened that gave Tilt the chance to escape. And honestly, that's not even explored in these 4 issues because there's so much of a different story to tell.
So let's actually talk about some of this because obviously Patrick is the main character.
Yeah.
And his story is sort of, I think, the driving force where he wants to stop this Council of Elders. He wants to know why they took him,
Right.
what exactly happened. And then you have all of these other side characters, Sydney, and obviously Exquisite, I think is his name.
Talon.
Talon, yeah. So, what, and people have gravitated towards those characters. So, what is that like? Because when you put something out in comics, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a very, I guess, you and your artist sort of world, and then you put it out there. It's not like you get instant feedback versus in wrestling. Right. If you're putting on a wrestling match, you will get instant feedback as the match is going on from the crowd. And so what is that like to have people actually react to a lot of these characters and be like, oh man, that they actually gravitate towards that? Because it could go the other way too.
Yeah, for sure.
Miss. And so what is that like for you? Because it's very interesting what people gravitate towards and even how that dictates the story and dictates the rewrites and other components of it. And even, potential covers and who's on the cover and how much airtime or panel time somebody gets, or even potentially a one-shot spinoff.
Exactly. I think kind of listening to those voices that are encouraging about it or that did find a piece of something that they identified with, I think is ultimately valuable as a creator, especially as a writer, because it gives you a little bit more room to play in the bigger side of your world. I mean, I always knew Exquisite was going to be a key piece. I didn't know that I was going to give him as much panel time as he got. I did know that Cindy was going to get a decent amount of panel time that would gradually increase. And then, of course, Patrick being the main character. The other one was Talon. I didn't know people would kind of... I felt like he was a decent villain because of their past and having a story and a connection there. But I didn't realize that people would really be like, yeah, like, I kind of understand where he's coming from, though. So I think that's been interesting as a writer to get that feedback, because you're right. For the most part, when you're developing the story, it's just me and the artist and the colorist and Matt were the other. That was the group, and so luckily Joe DeSantos has been in comics for forever now, and we love working together so much that we have another series that's coming out that we're working on together, and then somebody hired both of us to do a series for them. So we get to keep working together, and that's kind of cool. But him has, being in the industry for so long, he has a good idea of what people are vibing with. And we knew doing a superhero story was going to be tough because it's an indie superhero and a lot of people just won't give them a chance. But once people did, it really took off because issue 1 we didn't even campaign, which is dumb on our part, but it just wasn't what we were even thinking about when the company started. We campaigned Paradigm. Tilt #1 was just kind of a bonus that we gave store retailers. They got like their name on the cover and stuff, and that was the first way that we put Tilt 1 out. And then we started offering it to people, and we got a lot of really good feedback about the series.
So let's even go further into some inside base, because obviously a bunch of stuff happens, and for those who haven't read it, obviously, issue 1 to issue 4, there's a pretty big, entry point into it. Is how I
Yeah.
view the first 4 issues, where, and one of the things, and I'll spoil a little thing with Halem in particular, I like how the fact that he doesn't die and he's
Yeah.
defeated, but he's not eliminated, which
Yeah.
is always interesting. It's kind of like Lex Luthor from Superman. If you killed off Lex, then who would Superman fight in 6 issues from now or 12 issues from now? So
Right.
it's very interesting in that regard. But I do want to dive a little bit into inside baseball, because Tilt isn't that old, technically, for it to have a rewrite and a remaster.
Mhm.
But you did remaster elements and rewrite certain things. And I think you are relatively a new company. And so what was that like to say, hey, we are better off now, we are more experienced, and we can make a few little tweaks here and there to make this story better, or we could sharpen art, or maybe we could add an extra panel in there, an extra page, and it'll flow down better and it'll make more sense, or it'll give us, more room to drop something in issue 6 later on. And so what
Yeah.
was that like? Because that's a very tricky, I feel, thing to do, because some people are like, you shouldn't do that, and other people are like, you should. And what is that like for you?
So we knew from as soon as issue 1 was done that at some point it would get remastered. So we've kind of been sitting on this ever since, because our goal, once we saw that Tilt was a popular character, was to get to the trade. And so that's what we were working on for the past few years, was just get to the trade. And we knew that once we got to the point that we were ready to do the trade, we would go ahead and have the re-letters done. And I didn't change much as far as the actual text. There are a few panels that I cleaned up a little bit. But the way I look at it is, anybody that owns those single issues, you own something that nobody else is going to own from here on out. But the trade is going to be for everybody. And we were looking at this from a longevity standpoint. And we knew not only did we want to put the trade out through Kickstarter, but we're trying to do something else after that that's even bigger than that, that would put it into bookstores. And I think having that ideology of, well, how do we step it from just being a single issue thing for a couple of years while we're trying to get our footing, to how do we expand that to actually start making an impact with a little indie superhero.
Yeah, let's actually even dive into this and talk about graphic novels.
Yeah.
So I think Travis Gibb, right?
Yep.
So and I don't know if Travis is going to like me to say this or not, but he had a really hard time finding Broke Down and 4 Dead Bodies.
Right.
Really hard. And I don't think he's the only one. I think it's graphic novels lately have been really difficult on Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
And it, in my opinion, and feel free to disagree, is that it goes down to new things versus recycled old things.
You're absolutely right.
And it's complicated because, if I never bought Tilt in the single issues, then it's new to me. But if somebody bought Tilt before, it's complicated, because how do you get value to them? How do you get them to come back? How do you get them to say, hey, I want something on my bookshelf now versus in the floppies? And also, even going further outside of that, how do you earn my dollar? I hate to say this, but at this stage in the game, and I'm going to prove a point right here, is you're competing against something like this.
Right.
I mean, this is an awesome cover. This is Power Hour, and that's Comics Elite, Shikari, and you're competing against that, which is off Kickstarter. You're competing against somebody else's book on Kickstarter, and then you're competing against, just your comic shop or a store variant.
Right.
So
yep.
How do you figure out all that? Because it's so tricky right now, and it's so difficult. And also it's the summer, which doesn't help.
Well, here's the thing. A couple of things to realize. One, the book's been paid for, right? Because at this point, where we have the whole thing has already been done, already been published. So it was, the remaster was free because I did the read letters. So, and we also have extra content that's going into it. So there's an 88-page core story, but then on top of that, we have a 7-page short story that Joe DeSantos wrote and illustrated. And then there's 2 different flash fiction stories that are going there as well. So for us, the value comes in, if you want to get into the world, we're going to not just get you into the world one way, we're going to get you all the way invested into the Tilt universe. And to take it a step further, we have rewards that bring you into the world as well. We wanted to make something special when it came to publishing a trade, because I want it on my bookshelf, not just because I wrote it, but because it's a story that I enjoy. And I forget a lot until I read back through it when I was doing the re-letters, that I was like, oh, you know what? I kind of understand why people like this thing or that thing. So we wanted to look forward. Like I said earlier, it's about longevity more than anything else. I think the struggles with people funding, there's a whole bunch of different issues that are hitting creators right now. One of them is just people don't have the exposable income like they had before. The other one is the boob books, like you just showed. I mean, there's a massive market for that. But
I mean, I'll throw you a crazier one too. To even go with the book that I just showed, is that there's stuff on Kickstarter like that, and there's stuff also off Kickstarter.
Yep.
And there's some really good stuff. Even, Bad Girl art aside, there's some really great store variants that are now real competitors to Kickstarter.
Right.
And I think what to me, and it's just how I feel, is that you have to earn my dollar. And I think it's also a communication problem. If I go to your Kickstarter and your Kickstarter doesn't communicate the point to me, and doesn't communicate it between images, clean rewards, and hey, is this a vampire story or is this a gigantic robot story? Because I thought I was buying a robot story. I got a werewolf story. And I'm like, how did this happen? And I was massively confused. And poor communication, right?
Yep.
So, but sorry to cut you off.
No, you're fine. I mean, so for us, I guess a couple of things are, one, the joy of Kickstarter is people can see our track record. And like Jessica just said, the audience of people that would be going for Tilt are probably going to be pretty different than the ones that are going after the boob books, because it's a completely different ballgame. We're talking about a male-centric story that's much in the vein of late 80s, 90s. I mean, we play off of tropes in the thing. So I think what you said is very important, though. Having a clear message is what a lot of these campaign pages are lacking now, where you go on the campaign and you just don't know what the story is actually about. Instead, it's just a whole bunch of images, but it doesn't actually tell you anything about the story. And for a writer, and for someone that loves storytelling, I need to know what the story is before I'll invest in it. So from our side, I take that approach when I build out these campaigns, and we like to have fun with our rewards as well. I mean, there's one of them I smashed a VW buggy and autographed it just because in issue 4 he throws a VW bug through the window. And like, being creative and things that don't cost the creators a whole lot of money, I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't think of, is you have to create that value.
So there's 2 things I'm curious about. Do you also feel, though, that there's a point where sometimes the goal is also too high on some of these graphic novel projects? I mean, I saw somebody asking $20,000 for a graphic novel project. I saw somebody asking $15,000, and I was like, I understand that things happen, and I understand that to produce a whole graphic novel, it's expensive. Don't get me wrong, but there also is a point where you have to find that sweet spot where 3,000 might be a little high, but one, you can get there a lot quicker than you're going to get to 6,000. And once you're funded, sometimes people come in, but you also don't want to be too far away from what you really need, I guess.
Okay. So I'm going to mess people up when I say what our goal is, because it is a trade. It's a large book. It's 128 pages. Our goal is $1,500.
So let's talk about that, because this is where this gets interesting, right? Because it's like gamifying it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, people that know me, you might know Beards and Comics, where Matt and I talk about this stuff. We're always brutally honest, and I don't know, I've been on your show 4 or 5 times now. We know each other enough that you're comfortable with me being brutally honest.
No, I want you to lie to me. Come on.
Okay. So in that case, we need 30,000. No, I'm just. It's 1,500 because, like I said earlier, this book has been paid for. We paid the artist, we paid the colorist years ago because that's when the issue 4 got done. We've just been sitting waiting on what we wanted to do for the trade.
Did you also feel, and this is where I guess the honesty comes in, is that if you're funding a graphic novel and you're planning to do a bunch of cons, where the real money is not on Kickstarter, and maybe part of the problem is that the mentality is that people are trying to make their real money on Kickstarter when they should be using Kickstarter as a seed round. And they should be saying, cool, I need $5,000. It's going to cost me $8,000 to get this whole thing done, printed, and have another 400 copies, but I'm going to be bringing those to cons, and those have a value of 16,000. And so in reality, I'm just trying to get a bunch of money so that I don't max out my credit card, or I can manage the other $3,000 on my credit card efficiently.
Right.
Or I have savings that I'm going to pump in, and then I'm going to pay myself back. But I'm just trying to get 60-70% of the way there, what I really need, because the real money is at cons, or it's to comic shops, or it's my eBay store, or it's my Shopify website.
Right.
Or, I'll go to Indiegogo after this, or I'll go to Crowdfunder and the book's already printed. And so, do you think that's also part? Because I have a feeling that you're going to be printing way more than what people
Probably
are
expecting.
so, you're not going to do that.
No. All right. So money mismanagement is a huge thing, right? I mean, I know you've been doing this long enough to see it, where just people don't know how to manage money. Matt and I have been pretty decent at it. There's times where we undershoot shipping. Everybody undershoots shipping. But this one, look, I based it off of what if scenario. What if we sold 100 copies? How much would the 100 copies cost us to get to us and then ship to people? And we didn't need more than $1,500, because I'm not trying to make back the money from getting it illustrated and getting it colored, because we did that already. We've been able to start other series because of the money we got in other campaigns. What I realized doing this, because I thought that we were going to go into this having to do a much higher goal. But when I talked to the printer and they gave me the breakdowns, I was just like, wait, this is way more realistic than I ever thought I would be able to make this product. And on top of that, now we have the opportunity to get people in there and give them special incentives. For instance, like we'll set a stretch goal where we'll spot UV the cover, so that little dude on the front or tilt right there, he'll just be spot UV and raised up, and just like add value to the actual product that's getting into the people's hands. Because you remember that kind of stuff. Like, people remember dumb stuff that we've sent out, like blood splattered on the front of our Everville cover, and sending a bloody earring for One Last Job and stuff. Like, people just, that's what keeps people coming back. And the other benefit that we have for Tilt is that not a lot of people did get them. So a lot of people that will be experiencing Tilt will be experiencing it fresh. So it kind of was a blessing and a curse. It was a struggle for all those campaigns that inevitably got there. But it's also meaning that there's a whole market that kind of hasn't even experienced Tilt. And that's why I've been doing more shows and meeting new people and talking to different authors and moving outside of the comic book world. And back to the money mismanagement thing, if your goal is to get the campaign done and give people their books and then make all your money back in cons, I hope you get decent sales in cons. And that means you have to go to the good ones. For us, it would be nonsensical for a lot of the cons that were in our area for us to bring a trade and try to sell it, because the people that are going there aren't there for comic books at all. But the price difference, the exchange that we get in money off of selling one single trade compared to one single comic, I mean, it's like 3 or 4 times the cost of a comic. So for us financially, it just makes more sense to let's get the campaign done. And then while I'm getting the campaign done, we're also trying to get the book picked up by book publishers, not comic book publishers, but actual book publishers, to release to a wider audience that way. And that's kind of where the game changer is, because a lot of people aren't going to be willing to try that or even know how to approach the idea of getting it published.
There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, you touched upon a bunch of stuff, and obviously, I mean, it's well known that I run an eBay business and I run a store. I just went through a $25,000 expansion. Not spending $25,000, spent way less than that.
That's good.
way less. And I'm probably gonna do it again in about 4 or 5 months.
Right.
But I know my profit margins per book perfectly. So I know that if I buy a book for 20 and if I sell for 50, exactly how much I make
Yeah.
after I set aside money for taxes, pay myself back, shipping, eBay fees, all that stuff. I know exactly how much I make on that book, percentage wise. And the goal is not the one book doesn't make a difference, but when you're moving 100 of them, it's a large
Yes,
number.
for sure.
Um,
Well, let me throw a question at you real quick then. What is your I don't even know what the right term is. If you get trades from somebody and you sell those trades, like about what percentage are you ending up making back off of a trade rather than just a comic?
off of a trade. Um,
Let's say a $20 trade.
yeah, I've never really I sold like one trade in my life.
Exactly, exactly. But that's why I'm making the point here about why we're trying to look at book publishers rather than trying to go through the comic book route, because we understand when it comes to a trade, there's not as much value there for a comic book shop nowadays. Now, if we had an incentive cover or if it was a hardbound edition,
I am not a comic shop. I'm an eBay business, so
right,
I'm a very different entity because I am an online shop.
right,
There's two types of comic shops. There's your local comic shop that you physically go.
hmm,
I think trades have value there because I think if it's positioned right, I think it has value there because it's actually on a shelf, right? And it's
right,
next to comics and it's a collected bundle essentially. Versus for me, when I'm on eBay, nobody's going on eBay to buy a bunch of trades. I mean,
right,
people do, but that's not the primary play in comics on eBay with collector comics.
right.
Nothing, but on Amazon, it has value. A trade
Yep,
paperback. I mean, I buy
exactly.
trades all the time, and then on top of that, I think there's digital trades like Comixology, and also there's other things like Global Comics where a trade could also be very valuable
Mhm.
on a digital level for $7-8.
Right.
So it's so interesting. But again, if you going back to the money mismanaging, because I know way more about that than anything else. I think a lot of people in Kickstarter don't know their numbers.
Hmm.
I really think that that's one of the biggest problems is that because I don't think people approach it like a business. This
Right.
is a business. Just because you're not necessarily approaching and saying, I don't need to go make back every cent I put into the book
Hmm.
because it's already paid for, it was already accounted for, it doesn't mean you're not approaching this like a business.
Right.
And I think that's a problem. I know so many campaigns who do not understand that. Great, you're creating something that's fun, but you're a business. You're a small
Yep.
business. By definition, whether you raise $1,200 or 12,000 or 100,000, you are a small business.
Yep. I mean, I think that's why I brought up the point of like I based it off of what if we sold 100 of these things on a campaign? Like, what would the 100 cost us to get to us and to ship to other people? And it wasn't as expensive as I thought. It was. I mean, I overshot it with 1,500 just because I don't trust myself on shipping and stuff. Now, we get it certain advantages for sending a trade now, where we get to actually use media mail. I probably just threw shade at other people by accident, but yeah,
You can send it as a book because it's a book.
exactly, exactly. Where you shouldn't be doing that with single issues, people. Um,
I don't send single issues that way, but then again, when I'm selling an $80 book, I
oh
think
yeah,
it's
yeah,
absurd. I think
yeah.
it's
Well,
absurd.
I'm talking about other creators. Like nothing drives me nuts more than paying too much money on Kickstarter. Because let's face it, the point of Kickstarter has gotten so lost, so lost. The point of Kickstarter is to fund the creation of the thing. I mean, that's all it's for. And people are like, no, you have to have it 100% completed. And then they ship it to you over media mail. And so by the time it gets to you, it's destroyed or folded or just messed up. Then they have to send another one. And it's just, I don't know, just don't do that. I don't know.
Yeah, let's actually talk about that because this is where we get controversial.
That's fun.
So, Kickstarter to me has become three things. It is still people are creating things and they just want to create something, and that's what they're doing. They're funding their creation. The other thing is that it's a pre-order form.
Hmm.
And then thirdly, it's become a distribution center where a bunch of people are doing books every single month,
Yep.
back to back to back to back,
Yep.
and they're 6 months behind. Not 6 months behind, but Series A is coming out 5 months later, and then they start B, C, D, and E, and then when they start E, they send out A.
Yep.
For that was in January, and they're trying to run like previews essentially.
Yep.
And I've had this discussion, and I think as the customer of Kickstarter, I get fucked because what happens if B doesn't do what it's supposed to do? You launch C, now C's covering B, C doesn't do what it's supposed to do, D covers C, then still you're shy and you get B done, but now you have to run E to cover C, and then
you used to have protection as a buyer, and it doesn't exist anymore. Protection as a buyer. Now Kickstarter says on the bottom of every Kickstarter, you're not guaranteed your stuff. So I do want to make that distinction.
But I don't know though. I don't know how legal that is. And I think that there's a real legal argument because they are a facilitator of payment and it is their software.
Right.
And so they are an active participant and they've actively made a choice to say we've allowed creators to go back to back if they have a proven record. And
that's what I was about to call attention to, was that's what's changed. Is back in the day, like when I was starting on Kickstarter, you couldn't do that. It was against the rules to go back to back. It was against the rules to have it more than one place at one time, or to have more than one campaign at one time if it's associated with you. And now it's a free for all.
I think it was okay if you're doing an anthology. So if I was doing an anthology and you were on my anthology book, but you were running this one, I don't think Kickstarter would have cared because you have such a small part. But if all of a sudden you wrote half the book, that's a little bit different, and you're like a co-owner of the anthology. But I digress.
Well, to give you the point blank example is we have another series ready to campaign. Like it's called Fall of Night. Issue 1's ready to go, but I'm not going to do it until I feel comfortable with the release of the trade. Because I don't want to put myself in that kind of a stressful situation, first off. But secondly, I really appreciate all the people that have become backers or gotten invested in our company, and I don't want to hurt their feelings, and I don't want them to leave with a sour taste.
Did you also think that there is a position where, a lot of creators are running, like legitimately like 12 or 13 campaigns this year, and I've had discussions with people, and a lot of people have said, "Oh, you're wrong, Andrew." But I said, you could drain your customer. You could bankrupt your customer. And people said, "Oh, well, $20 every month is not a lot of money." But no, $20 is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Just to prove a point, I order from Midtown. My average buy on Midtown is about $30 a month. Mm-hmm. That's about 14 to 15 comics.
Yeah.
From previews. So I'm getting about a 45 to 50% discount because I ordered 2 or 3 months in advance.
Yeah.
So what I think is that Kickstarter is expensive. I get that we're funding indie. I get that a lot of this stuff is not mass produced. And I'm okay with that. But $20 is a lot every single month. And if you have one every single month and then you have 4 or 5 you want to back, that's $100, $200 a month out of nowhere.
Right.
And I really think, though, that if you go every 3 months or every other month, you give your base time to breathe and not go belly up. And I think that if you're going every single month, I think there's going to get a point, and so is everybody else, that's supposed to say, I'm done. And then they're going to miss out something. They're going to drop out of one of your series. Yeah. And you'll say, well, I'm diverse, but that's not really great because once they drop out of one, dropping out of the other one and the next one and the next one gets easier and easier and easier.
That's right. I mean, I'm guilty of that. Like as soon as a bad situation hit me, I was like, well, the first thing I need to stop doing is backing all these campaigns. And it's not like I want to. I don't want to miss out on stuff, especially stuff that, like, I have friends and colleagues that are putting stuff out. But at the end of the day, it's like you said, $20 a month might not sound a lot to a lot of people, but like, I mean, I got kids. Like, I got stuff to pay for. That's just not the way that this works.
I'm extremely selective. I
have become it's almost embarrassing. Like, I've become selective to the point where it's just like certain creators, I'm just not even gonna look at their stuff anymore.
I mean, I'll throw something out there. So Larry Welts has Cherry. Cherry is a great book from the 80s. It's the one of the original Bad Girl Art books.
Right.
Without Cherry, Bad Girl Art wouldn't exist. Companies like Dynamite, Zenoscope, companies like Big Dog Inc., Jim Noble, they wouldn't exist without Larry Welts.
Right.
Freedom of speech in comics wouldn't exist without Larry Welts. Larry Welts is, and I'm going to say this, is very similar to Larry Flint from Hustler in a lot of ways, because it pushed the line and it was necessary when he was doing it. And there were real issues with Cherry and fighting for it.
Right.
So that anthology of 30 years of Cherry, all of the issues in a hardcover book, just came out. It's ending in like a week, I think. It's $132 book. Like, I was waiting for that thing to drop. So when
someone else has to go.
so certain things have to go. And obviously, I just went through a very massive business expansion. And so I'm very selective. And especially when I'm picking up retail packages and other things, I have to be. And so it's not that your book, no offense, not using you as an example, is bad. It's just that what do I think I need to buy today? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, but it comes from different. It comes from different viewpoints of the things that you're interested in and the things I'm interested in are probably not the same. So we're looking at different things anyway. Now, I think one of the biggest problems that's occurring now on campaigns is that it's nothing more than a bunch of other creators throwing money at each other. That's mostly what a lot of campaigns have been. So anyone that we've had where we have a decent amount of people that aren't creators, that is super exciting to me, because I love seeing people that are just buying comics because they like comics, not because they want you to buy their comic when they put it out on Kickstarter. A lot of people aren't going to like that I said that, but it's something that occurs every day.
Oh, look, I mean, you see it. I see it all the time. You know how many freaking broke comic creators I know?
Yep.
And it's crazy. So I don't know if you know this. I ran a campaign for this show, and people gave me
remember it.
People gave me so much shit for it, and every day I see people saying, "I need money for San Diego Comic-Con. I need money to go here. I need money to go there." And I'm like, I did this, and you all gave me shit for it. What the fuck?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Look, we had Beards and Comics podcast is officially on a hiatus. We're going to do one more show. It's going to be a live show, and it's going to be our farewell. And we've told people it's a hiatus, and so people are like, "Well, we'll look forward to when you come back." And I don't think we're coming back. There's no point in it anymore. We did what we set out to do, which was talk about creating indie comics. We met a whole lot of great people, talked to a bunch of people, but then it just became taxing and a whirlwind of just constantly the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And even shows like this, like, look, there's a deep part of me that detests that I'm even on here having to talk about a campaign, because I hate, no, not because of you, because of the culture of, somebody would come on our show and then they'd be on 6 other shows within a week talking about the same freaking thing. So like we've watered down the market to the point where it didn't make any sense for us.
It's interesting. To continue. It's interesting. I used to do a bunch of media, but I never did media on comics.
Right.
I did media on finance.
Right.
And I'd be talking about the same thing, but every time the host would be like, "I've never heard that before." Because I have a very different view, and people are like, "This is really interesting," and I'm very articulate about certain things. And so when I was doing that, and like, for me, it worked, because apparently I just wanted to drive it in over and over and over again. But now I don't want to do media all that frequently. No. I want to do one show a week. I want to do like 50 interviews a year, and that's it. Because where I'm being interviewed, and even I think that's a lot. But for me, what's happened with this show is that it's evolved, and it's become a lot, I guess, outside the box. And also, I'm privileged enough where, I mean, a few weeks ago, I had essentially a first, dev model cam girl on. So she is not a real person.
Right.
She is completely animated in certain ways, and so I'm privileged enough where my show is interesting in that regard, where there's a reason why I'm playing comics, voice acting, diving slightly into the adult world a little bit, obviously cosplay, wrestlers, because it keeps the show fresh. Yeah. And I think a lot of these, though, indie shows, all you're doing is talking about indie comics. It gets stale.
Well, like I said, what ends up happening is whoever has a campaign at that time, they're on every show at the same time. It's the same thing I'm doing right now. I mean, I'm completely being a hypocrite. But the reality is it's a reason why Beards and Comics is not continuing. Is we started expanding to the point where we're talking to other creative people, like in other fields, and that was fun for us. But then looking at the numbers and the analytics, the amount of people that were interacting with our email blasts every week were 2, 3, 4 times more than the people that were listening to the podcast.
See, that's interesting because I don't have people interacting with my podcast. I have people interacting with my TikToks. I have people interacting with my shorts on YouTube. I have people, when I start putting this stuff out on Instagram, it gets traction. So the interview itself is not the winner for me,
Right,
at all. It's all the micro content.
well, look at what's happening with the music industry, where all the music industry, they release 15, 30 to a minute long clips of songs that aren't done, and then if it gets enough traction, then they'll finish the song. But there are like popular bands where if you scroll back on their Instagram or TikTok, you'll find clips from songs that have just never been released, and it's because they never did well. And I think that's a fascinating way to think about how much has changed in content creation,
Oh,
where you
oh,
could just put it all in for 30 to a minute and see if people like it, and then not have to worry about recording the rest.
Oh, it's great. It's great. It's awesome because I'll ask, Rebecca Forstad. I'm a big Robotech fan. I'm a Cross fan. She plays Lin Min May.
Mhm.
And, I go way back in anime. And how'd you get the voice of Lin Min May? Just a minute, 30 seconds. It's all somebody wants to know. They just want the answer to the
Yep.
question.
Yep.
They just want the answer. Like, oh my God, this is awesome. And then what happens is that I put a link to the rest of the interview and I might get like a 20% retention on that, which
Right.
is nice, which is really good. It's
Right.
really good. The stuff that does well on YouTube for me is wrestlers and voice actors.
Mm.
That shit does well. And
Yeah.
and depending on who that wrestler is, like Mickey Knuckles, she's loved and she kills. Masha Slamovich is loved, and there you go. Anthony Green is loved. Nixon Noel, who's Tegan Knox in WWE, is loved. So there you go. I understand what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
But then every once in a while, something like this happens where, you just get somebody in comics who's loved. But
Yeah.
it is what it is. But you mentioned something interesting about the music stuff, and it goes back to retail. And obviously, this is also we're going to get controversial. We said we were going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it anyway. Because that's it's fascinating because that's something that I'm doing where I like to bring in 10 of a book or 5 of a book, and I like to test the market to
Right.
see how it does. And so I might bring in 3 of a particular book, and I did this with Mount Olympus. And then if those books sell, I will buy more of them. And I think this is a big problem in comics where I see retail packages of 50 books for 375. The president has 10 covers. I'll mention who it is because I like it. Dustin Burnell.
Okay.
It's great.
Yeah.
And it's a great deal. That's
Right.
not the problem. The problem is that 50 books for somebody like me
What
is
are you gonna do with it?
it's too
Yeah.
many to move that in an uncertain position. I
Mhm.
would rather buy 10 of his book or somebody else's book versus because it's 50 books for $400, which is not bad at all. It's not bad at all things considering, especially if those books go for 20 a pop.
Yeah.
15 to 20 a pop, that's not a bad margin at all, even on eBay. I
Right.
mean, I'll clear 5 on that easy all day. The problem is that 50 books is a lot of material to hold on an uncertain, but I want to buy 10 of his books at a retail price so I could test the market. And if it works, I then want to test it at 20. And then I want to test it at 30 because I need to know what my audience is going to react to it and what my customers are going to react to it in what time frame. And I think it's a real problem on a retail side with comics that you have to understand price point. You have to understand other things because I'll go back to the Mount Olympus. At $50, those books move.
Right.
At $50, I make about a 27% profit.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand is that the magic number is 50
Right.
with that book with my audience. And so I'm very curious how you feel about all of this because I think it's a real problem in funding on Kickstarter and even for the industry as a whole because I think the market has moved on how you sell books.
Yeah, I think the market's moved a lot, and I think uh,
I think people like me are very relevant in certain realms because we are the new outlet in a lot of ways.
yeah, exactly. And it's kind of why. Ugh. All right, it's kind of why I don't care to offer a retail tier.
Oh, I see how it is. I see how it is.
I'm just being honest with you because, like you just said, so here's the
You
thing.
know I'm joking. You know
But
you opened yourself up for that one.
yeah, I know. But to be honest with you, like I want to be able to offer retailers a certain deal or whatever. And like you just said, if I've put a certain stipulation on it already, where it's this many for this amount of money, I feel like I'm shooting myself in the foot. Where on the flip side is if I took that time to actually contact you and be like, hey, what do you feel about like if you were to get this many, how many would you want to get or whatever? I've done that. There's been stores that I just had them put the money in and not select a reward on our campaigns, and then we had talked about it elsewhere off campaign, and they put the money in and we shipped the books to them directly, and it's because not everybody needs the same thing. We had a store in South Carolina that was the biggest Tilt supporters, and they bought the first issue was 50, and then 100, and then 150 for their own personal store variant covers. And I mean, we're not going to say no to that, but we had to talk about all that stuff separately. I'm not going to put a tier that forces you into a box when I feel like if you really want the books to try and sell them, like let's talk about it and we'll figure something out. Beyond that, the other thing I was going to say was with this thing in particular, as I said earlier, our goal is to get this to people, and then we want to get it into actual like bookstores. And get it through an actual publisher, which is going to open up another way of retailers being able to get their hands on it anyway.
No. It makes sense. It's just I just think that so many people are just not good at this, and I think
Yeah.
I think a lot of people in comics do not understand.
I think a lot of people just want to get their ideas out, and because that's how it started for me. I didn't want to have to do all this stuff. Like I mean, it's always interested me. I've always been fascinated by markets and money and like how this stuff kind of breaks down. And so Matt and I have always been fascinated by that stuff, and I think that's why we've been able to manage even because people will look at our campaigns and like, man, they don't make a whole lot, but like we've not gone in the hole though, like substantially for sure.
This is what's interesting. See, I'm the exact opposite. I run my business, and everything is a commodity.
Right.
So I understand that there's certain people that I know that I could revolutionize their business and be their CFO. So I operate as a CFO. I don't operate as a creative.
Right.
Where I understand that, and I love every aspect of this. So I know every margin in my business. I know when somebody offers me, I just sold a card, and I know the exact margins on that card. I know what it cost me. I know what I sold it for, and we were in a tough negotiation between $125 and $130, and I was running numbers because I was trying to get to a certain percentage. I wound up caving, but I understood what the percentage looked like at 125, what it looked like at 130, what it looks like at 140, because and I know those numbers off the top of my head. And so and I know exactly how much I'm going to clear. And so that's where I'm good at, and I love every aspect of that. And I think that's where people lack because it's not as fun. It's not fun. I mean, to me, it's a blast because
it's not. Yeah, I mean, as a creative, it's like you have to put that hat on at some point, or you're just going to ruin yourself financially. And I know way too many creators that took out credit cards and loans that are in the hole because they didn't think this through long enough.
I did my expansion debt free.
So
I did it debt free, even though it was put on a credit card. It was put on a credit card with money paying my bill. So every time I put it on the credit card, 3 days later, I made a credit card payment. That to me is not used. That's using debt, but that's not using debt the same way. That's just convenience. But it was completely debt free and it was completely cash flowed, which is awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
But I know so many people who have no idea, and I know people who are barely making. That's why people, as I was stating, saying, "Hey, anybody need a gig? I want to go to San Diego. Hey, anybody want to buy some comics. I want
Yeah.
to go.
Oh man, I've been seeing so many of those posts lately. Look, I'm in a bad spot in my life wise, like, financially and all that stuff. But like when it comes to the comic book stuff, I've just been figuring out ways to make that junk work. I mean, if you care about it enough, at the end of the day, the reality that I didn't start this as a comic book writer and a comic book creator. I have been a writer my entire life, and it's all I care about, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. And now I'm at the point where the comics have been doing what they're doing, and I'm going to keep doing as much as I can. But I'm working on multiple other like prose books. I have a devotional coming out. I have 2 novels that I want to work on, and that's where my current mindset is. But there's other stuff that I've already done that's waiting to get put out that's just going to be coming out. So it's just the way it is.
See, that's interesting, because I don't know if I'm ever going to be a creator. I as far
But
as comics go.
if that spark's not in you to be a creator, I wouldn't even bother with it. I would just be really good at what you're doing.
For me, my next stage is business, and that's
Yeah.
where I want to go.
And that's great. And it's what a lot of people need to hear more about. I told Jessica, who commented earlier, also hi John, hi Dan, hi Jessica. I had told her that when we look for a social media marketer or an advertising marketer, I don't want anyone attached to comic books. I want them to come at it from just a completely different angle, because the stuff that's going on in comic books right now, I think, is ridiculous. I don't think it's working for a lot of people, and a lot of people.
Let's talk about that, because I think, and these are some of my friends, and I still like them, but I think
Same here.
I think there's a lot of grandstanding. I think there's a lot of whining. I think there's a lot of throwing people under the bus.
There's a lot of cult building.
I was viciously attacked for 43 minutes, dunked on by a group of people. 43 minutes, guys, attacking, falsehoods. There's consequences for actions, and we're gonna leave it at that. With that, they didn't finish me. In fact, it inspired me to still be here more. So they ingrained it in more than anything else. Because you either quit or you get tougher. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of weird shit going on. I think that, and look, I think that, again, I think it's not working. I think it's not working. And I've been listening to a lot of Gary Vee. You know who Gary Vee is, right?
Oh, I know who Gary Vee is.
I love Gary Vee.
That's the guy that says the stuff that like a lot of us think, but he just says it louder with cuss words. He's also good on the business side of stuff. But like, look, I'll say one thing about Gary Vee, and then I'll let you continue because it might be insulting. Gary Vee is great with the business stuff, but when he talks about just life input, I'm like, dude, shut up. Like, it's the most basic stuff, just loud.
My point, though, is that he makes a really good statement. He says kindness will win, and kindness is not a weakness. And what he's getting at, constructive. That it might sound like it's basic. It might sound like it's the most basic thing. He's screaming it off the top of the roof the loudest. But if you look at a lot of people who are grandstanding and doing a bunch of this crazy shit, they're not very nice people. And I think it's starting to show that the nice people are really winning the war. Because I forget who said it, but I'll ask you the question because it'll get us to where I want to go at the least, or maybe at least it'll get me where I want to go in this interview. Is if you have the ability to work with an asshole or a nice person, who do you want to work with?
Depends on what I need done.
No. If somebody walks in and you don't know anything about them, and my point is that
it's a nice person.
I'd rather work with a nice person who is 90% as good as the asshole.
Yep.
Because the nice person is going to at least be nice, be likable, and is probably going to be easier to deal with than the asshole who is 10% faster.
Well, going back to what you said earlier with the Gary Vee statement on kindness is like, I guess I shouldn't make fun of him for saying things like that because it's a thing that a lot of people need to hear, especially nowadays.
I could tell a story that might be a perfect example. I don't know if you know who Eddie Kingston is. Eddie Kingston is in AEW. So Eddie Kingston was my 11th interview of all time. No idea what the fuck I was doing. Eddie Kingston was a legendary wrestler at that point. He's killing it everywhere he goes. And I was not ready. I was raw, and it was not a good interview. Eddie probably realized 20 minutes in that this kid is okay, but he's really new, and this is not a good fucking interview. But instead of saying, "Oh, I only have 20 minutes," he tolerated the whole thing for like an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And he made it work, right?
Yeah.
So that's an element of kindness when, and I've been in interviews where I'm like, oh, fuck, I got to carry this interview. So instead of beating the person up, you carry the interview. And I was answering ways that were throwing softballs.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about kindness and things of that nature with Gary Vee, that's an element of what I think he's talking about. And I think that
Absolutely.
is somewhat lacking in comics, where it's like, wait a second, if somebody isn't there, maybe you want to throw them a nice softball so they could get, a double or a triple or a home run.
Well, that was the entire point of why Beards and Comics became a podcast, was we wanted to do something that would help creators who were trying to just figure it out. And so it was interesting to see throughout that course, different people get into comic books, or actually like get their books put out and do all the stuff that we talk about on the show. I think it's been gratifying for us up until the point where it wasn't fun anymore to record. And so that's why we just have all those episodes up. If anyone wants to learn about getting into comics, it's still there for everybody. But for us as a recorder, you don't want to keep talking about the same thing. But going back to the kindness thing, the difference is, I think a lot of people do really need to hear that and understand it. For me personally, like, that's been a part of my upbringing since I was a child, and a part of my faith as well, was the kindness element. And so when I approach this stuff, I try to do it as nicely and kindly as possible. I might be blunt, but it's going to be, you're going to be hard pressed to find people in the comic book industry that are willing to call me an a-hole. I'm sure there are a few because of different situations that have occurred in the past, but for the most part, I try to treat everybody with kindness, and I try to chat and be nice. And it's been interesting to see, like, throughout the course of the things that are going on in my regular day-to-day life, it's been interesting to see who is still like, you know what, I need to check on Aaron. I haven't talked to him or heard from him in a while. And I think that's because of the kindness thing. But I teamed up with someone like Matt, because Matt, he's nice to me, but he's a jerk. Like, and he knows it, and he's okay with it. And so we teamed up, knowing that if there was an instance where someone needed to be a jerk, that's Matt's department. If there's an instance where someone needs to introduce themselves to somebody, that's Aaron's department. So.
No, I know there are people who don't like me in comics, and I'm fine with that. I'm absolutely fine with that. But there's plenty of people who like me. There's plenty of people who still want to be my friend. There's plenty of people who don't want anything to do with me, and there's plenty of people who will put a knife in my back at any given point. They just don't know that I know that they're going to do it. It's going to be very interesting when I turn around as the knife's going in, like, oh. It's going to be very interesting. I'm like, and two, Brute, and two. It's going to be a fascinating day. It'll be a great TikTok for TikTok for me. 300 views, guys. That's right. All I'm trying to break. I've actually broken that. I did like 5,000 on one, but that's not the point. I didn't do any of the work. My guest does all the work. It was great. But yeah, no, it's interesting. So let's actually talk about the whole thing with your podcast, because I know you're trying to do a Patreon. Obviously, did that.
No mas.
What?
No mas.
Yeah,
I took it down. Yeah. So the Patreon.
You know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah, I do.
So I will go get to my point, is that I got so much shit when I asked for money for this show,
right?
And I still get shit for it.
Yep.
And it apparently agitated people for whatever reason. And this is my response back to people. And I'll get real honest, is that I know plenty of people who use bookers to get on shows. Those bookers don't pay these shows. And then those guests that hire, whether they know or they don't, I think they're responsible. I think they're absolutely responsible, because if you're going to pay a booker to book you on 30 shows for a podcast and you don't pay the show, that's telling me that you don't respect my show and you don't respect me, and fuck you, Andrew. That's exactly what it's telling me. And then the same people say, I don't pay to be on shows, which means you're hypocritical. So if you want to say, look, I pay my booker to get me on your show, but I'm not paying twice, I can respect that. And I can say, look, I can't have you on my show.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem, is that that's one of the problems. And it's pay to play, because you're paying for everything else in comics. So why wouldn't you want to pay for media unless you value the media at zero? So why do you want to be on the show? And that's my whole question to everybody in this industry, is that what economic value do you put on my show? Because if you think my show is worth a penny, then write me a check for a penny. But that means that if you use a booker and you paid your booker $200, you overpaid your booker.
Yeah. I mean, so in my realm, what ended up happening was the same thing, where it's just people coming on that have campaigns. It wasn't enjoyable for us, because I know there are plenty of shows that they love talking about the campaigns and stuff. For Matt and I, we are obsessed with creativity, and that's the kind of fun stuff that we like to chat about. And so I'm not putting any of those other shows down, but what we noticed was
Fair weather friends, maybe?
What we noticed is when you drop a Patreon. So we had a buy me a coffee originally.
I have that still.
So we had a buy me a coffee, and like we actually had people that would subscribe and stuff. And then we put the show on a temporary hiatus that we didn't intend to. But when we came back, we decided to move over to Patreon. And when we went to Patreon, nothing, zero. Nobody was interested. Nobody wanted to talk. And we also noticed during that time period that it's not like any of the numbers have changed as far as listeners and stuff. And so we never approached the podcast as this was going to be our business, because there's all the other stuff we care about. But what we did realize, like I said earlier, is that when we drop an email update to everybody, it's 4 to 5 times more likely to get looked at, clicked on, interacted with than any episode of our podcast. And so we just sat there for a minute, and I realized, like, I've had fun doing this, but I'm a creator at heart. I could take this time to be working on books, on writing, on editing, on graphic design. Like, that's time, because people don't realize from, your and my side, we have to take time to, for us, it was an audio podcast. So we recorded in StreamYard, and then we have to download it and edit the clips, and then put all the clips up on various social media. And like, it's work.
I'm going to ask you a question on that. How much time does it take?
So by the end here, I got really good at just having preset stuff that I could drag and drop. And so it would kind of cut it and do it for me. So it would take, to get where I wanted it to be, was probably like 3 to 4 hours. And that was for about 2 weeks worth of content.
My show, so an interview takes about 2 hours, right?
Right.
From start to finish, give or take. Actually, it probably takes about 45 minutes now. Used to take a week to write an interview when I first started, almost like 9-10 years ago.
Right.
So a week down to 45 minutes to an hour, maybe an hour and a half, if it's a little bit more complicated, because I have a pretty good idea. Then to cut up content, so to get 3 to 4 pieces for TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. So that's 12 pieces of content, but I have to only do it once. That takes, and then that's combined with micro content, which I get anywhere from 8 to 12 out of every single episode. That takes about 4 hours. So, but that's about 42 to 45 pieces of content out of it, which lasts a while. That probably, on 12 pieces of content, probably lasts about 10 weeks. Because I subsidize that content with other interviews. It's just automatic. So when I have, and usually I have anywhere from 6 to 10, sometimes I have 12 in play on a cycle. So if interview 1 goes, interview 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 13 days later, you go again. Very cool. But it's also, the reason why I spend the time doing it is that once that content is developed, it's out there in the ether forever.
Right.
So it has replay value, and I don't look at it on a business level of, I don't need it to work today. I need it to be there so that at some point I will get monetized on YouTube, and I will have 9,000 videos making me a penny each, which will make me a lot of money in the long run.
On my side of all this stuff, what I ended up realizing was I would rather do this. Like, I would rather come on to somebody's show and just chat about, honestly, I just like chatting about creativity. in comics and writing. Like sitting here and if you notice, if everybody watching noticed, we talked about Tilt at the beginning, but ever since then, it's just been Andrew and Aaron hanging out. Because it's kind of always been this way with us, though. I mean, this is like my fourth or fifth time on here, and we always inevitably just end up talking shop. But that also pays homage to how great you are as a host, because you're willing to actually have conversations.
It's also, I don't get to talk shop with people because there's a bunch of people who are not educated enough. And that's not a knock on anybody, but there's very few people who want to talk shop, want to talk how the sausage is made, and also understand business, also understand things. So I'll give an example. There's certain things like my guest that I had like 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. We couldn't talk certain things because it was under an NDA. So I knew well, and she told me ahead of time, and I said, I kind of want to go this direction anyway because it was a fun interview. Not one of it wasn't like my best interview ever. It was the most fun interview I ever had. But we had a lot of fun. But I don't get to talk shop because a lot of people don't want to talk about it. Because guess what? When you start talking shop, you start stepping on toes. You start going into dangerous territory. And I'm brutally honest about economics. When I'm on an economics show, I am brutally honest about things. And it can agitate people. And there's a reason why people are pissed off at me. I have no doubt about it. And I mean, I'll give it to Raw. I mean, I've said this before. I think you can bankrupt your customer. I think if you're running a campaign every single month, you will bankrupt your customer and you will kill the cow.
Yeah. I agree. It's kind of what I was talking about a little bit earlier. It's I don't want to be that person to other people. Like I would rather do this kind of stuff where I get to come on and talk about creativity and the things that don't work, because I think that's vitally important information. And, it's a lot of what our show had ended up becoming was just, we want to let people know, here's where we screwed up. And like, here's the things that we learned from it. And hopefully people don't make those same mistakes. But the nature of the beast right now is the same stuff you said earlier. There's a lot of grandstanding. A lot of people are building their own groups behind themselves. And I don't see any value in picking sides or being part of that. I just want to write. Like, I just want to create stuff and tell cool stories and see if anybody likes them. that's all I care about.
Honestly, I'll be very honest. All I want to do is I just want to sell books. I want to get a bunch of, good deals on my books that I buy. And I want to take my money and then I want to invest it into the stock market so that if I ever get sick and tired of my day job, or if I say I want to take a 2-week sabbatical and you guys don't have to pay me, I can. Right. Yeah, I don't have to worry about money, and I'm probably going to get there a lot quicker than I realized. And the second I stop posting on Twitter, scheduling Twitter every Sunday and every Saturday, 90 days out, my eBay business has exploded.
Yeah,
and I hate to say it, but I've gotten to a point where I'm just like, look, I understand what I want, because when I have real money and I have real cash flow and I have multiple streams of income, I don't really give a shit about this stupidity,
right?
Of you guys doing this shit because I mean, I'll ask this: how do you measure success, right? Because this is the problem. I see all these people talking about marketing, good business, comic this, comic that, how to run your business, how to do this in comics, and the thing that I don't see being spoken about is, what is your margins? How do you get your printing down? What decisions do you make? If you know you're going to do an issue 2, do you double up on cover A for the first campaign so you don't have to reprint cover A, and maybe you knock 10 cents off the complete order per issue, or 3 cents off that adds up? I don't see those conversations happening. I don't see conversations of, hey, how do you sell your book? How do you have a discussion? What do? Do you take a distribution out of your business? Do you get your business down to a zero cost base? Meaning that if your whole thing costs you $6,000 with printing and you did 12, do you take the $6,000 for issue 2 and then legitimately pay back yourself the $6,000? And now you are at a zero cost business, which means that if your business now does another 12,000 for issue 2, you're $6,000 up. Or do you then go build a divergence, or do you expand? Like, I don't see that happening in the industry. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in business, is that not necessarily with comics, but how do you handle those decisions? Because that's something that I figured out, or do you have a forward carry? Like, there's all sorts of stuff, and this is where I feel like I can really help people in this realm, but I don't see those conversations happening. I see conversations of how do you, build a YouTube channel? How do you do this? But it's fucking hard, guys.
Yeah. Well, I kind of feel like that should be the direction of the show. Like, if it's a thing that you're interested in, because that's exactly what we did. Is there came to a point where we just wanted to do something different, and the things that we were finding interesting and useful and helpful for other people, that's kind of what we were letting lead us. And if we found it interesting, then we thought maybe people would find it interesting when we're listening.
It's coming, but I'm actually interested in doing it on a more business level.
Yeah.
And I'm actually probably going to build out a separate YouTube channel for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Which will give me way more flexibility and a lot more enjoyment, because it's what I enjoy talking about.
Right.
I like talking about money. I like comics, I like pop culture because I'm privileged. Because the second comics gets hot, I will go to voice acting. And I really enjoy talking about voice actors. And I really enjoy it because these are people that I watch and I enjoy. I mean, I'm watching a show, Spice and Wolf, and Brina Palencia was on. She's Hollow, the Wise Wolf from Spice and Wolf. And it's fucking awesome when you get to do that. She's Chopper from One Piece, too, for those who don't know. So I got to interview Daniel Ba, who's Jinbei. I got to interview Mr. Tuban Clay, Barry Yandel. All this shit is like my childhood. So,
Right. That's my point, is like the whole point of it is we get to play with the things that we enjoy. Like, that's why we did it in the first place. And then we met a lot of cool people and got to talk to people we didn't think we'd get to talk to. And at some point you're like, all right, well, I don't want to talk to people about their stuff anymore. Like, I'll see you guys on every other social media. Like, we always repost each other's stuff anyway. So,
but it's interesting. I'm extremely selective on my show. I'm really selective. There's plenty of people I'm like, I have no desire to talk to at all. No desire.
I mean, somehow I ended up on here 5 times.
But it's odd in which that, there's plenty of people that I'm like, oh, why don't you want to interview these people? I'm like, they are trying to go me. And I'm like, because I'm going to be pulling teeth on an interview when it's my show and when it's my night that I didn't go out to the bars because I had to make sure this show was going to operate the next day, or that it was going to be paid for and spending the $100 at the bar. Yeah, I get to call the shots.
Right.
And when you want to call the shots on my show and somebody tried to do that, I'm like, great, write me a check as an investor and we'll start talking. But I don't need your capital. I don't need anybody's capital. I need expertise. I don't need capital anymore.
That's right.
And anybody could write me a check, or I could borrow the money if I needed it, or I have the money. So there you go. But that's where I'm at. But I think it's really interesting. But I do think the market is saturated across the board. But I don't know. I don't know if we're all just talking about the same shit, because
so you and I right now aren't. And I can tell you that from the person that's been on other people's shows and stuff is that with you, I have a very different show because you actually read the books and you actually know what you're asking. Most shows that I've been on do not know anything about what I'm doing or have never looked at the books, even if I sent them to them. But you actually ask questions that are like, oh, okay, well, he actually at least flipped through the freaking book. And then beyond that, we also have the opportunity to talk about business and like what things aren't working. Most shows don't do that either. A lot of shows are just trying to be overly immature and playful. And I don't know if that's because of the mindset of what they think people want in comic books, or if people just really don't care to have a thoughtful conversation anymore. But that's kind of how I feel about things now. And that's why I enjoy stuff like this, because it actually, I get to use my brain every once in a while.
It's interesting in which that I've been on a bunch of comic shows, and I don't want to name names, but I'm like, how the hell do you not do research on me? Right? Like how do you not do homework on me? And I was on a show and they took a flyer on me. And after the show, they're like, I'm glad we took a flyer on you. They openly said, I'm glad, because they were like, oh man, you came prepared with props. You came prepared with thoughts. You came prepared with some cool things out of your collection. Like I was showing like a cool Aaron Judge card. I was showing a really cool comic. And they're like, that's really cool. You actually came prepared on a visual show, swinging out for the fences. And this is amazing. And people were like, this is kind of really cool that somebody actually came prepared was articulate and actually made a fair position. And I was
Right.
just like, and then they said, "Yo, dude, do you know how much money you're going to be worth?" And I said, "I think I do. I think around 10."
I guess we'll find out.
He was like, "You're going to be worth more like 6 to 7 by the time you retire, the way you're going." I'm like, "I guess." But like, I played it off modestly, but it was a great interview. And like, you could tell, like, during the middle of the interview, like, holy shit, like this guy actually took this thing seriously. And, but yeah, no. I agree. I think it's a problem. I think a lot of people do not know what the fuck they're talking about
Yeah.
on shows. And I think it's a problem. I think it's a real problem.
I think what ended up happening was everyone thought that they could make a show because everyone can. I think that's the problem is everyone can make a show. And so now there's a whole bunch of copy paste and there's a whole lot of people that shouldn't be hosting shows that are hosting shows. And it's always interesting to me to go on a show, and there's been multiple shows now that I've been on where afterwards when the camera cuts off, they're like, dude, like, could we ever talk you into like hosting with us? Or like, man, you need to come back on literally anytime. And so it leaves me feeling like, man, there's no way you've done this many interviews and haven't and haven't encountered other people that are fun to talk to, you know. And then I'm like, well, how much of that's on the host and how much of that's on the guests? I don't know. I just like creativity, and that's what we're here talking about. So whatever.
Yeah, no, I don't get invited. I don't get invited on shows. It's a problem.
Well, I don't either until I ask. Like I literally had to. I mean, you popped up on mine when I put a message out there, which is nice, and I always appreciate it. But like getting on news shows has been so extremely difficult, and then getting on like some, you know, there's people I know like very well that have shows, and they will not put me on, and I don't know if it's because like they're worried or what the problem is. But you know, that's fine. I don't really I don't want to go where I'm not welcome.
Oh, well, I know there's people who don't want me on anymore. And I'm like, okay, I'm cool with that. It's whatever. Yeah. Honestly, I mean, like, you know, at this point, I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. And, you know, I would like to be on certain people's shows, but I want to be on people's shows to talk about things that are not traditional. Like, I want to talk about the business side of comics. I totally enjoy that.
And see, that's what happened with the last campaign that I probably really messed up on. Was I told all these people I wanted to go on I wanted to go on shows and just talk about creativity or writing, and everyone I went on still like made me talk about the campaign, and so I was like, all right, well this time around I guess I'll just go straight ahead. But to be honest with you, like after this campaign's done, I kind of just want to see if I can get on shows and just talk about creativity, but it's not going to be on comic book shows because they don't do that. They just talk about your projects.
No. I mean, I talk about people's projects.
I know we started that way, but what I'm saying is like it's a difference because you're open to talk about other stuff, whereas a lot of shows I go on, if you start talking about business or if you say some of the things that I've said, they're just going to be like, well, let's get back on topic or let's end the show. You know?
Yeah, no. I know I'm not on a bunch of shows. I've burned enough bridges, and you know what? I don't really know if I care. And honestly, an event changed me earlier this year, and it changed my mindset. And that's the whole thing is that we go back to the whole issue where grandstanding, and I think, and I'm going to use it, I think we've become very much, and I'm going to say a word, I think we've become a pussified, you know, peoples, for lack of a better word. If somebody punches you in the face, and then a week later you say, let's make peace, you have legitimately become a pacifist by definition. Right. You become worse than a pacifist. You become submissive is a good way to put it. And somebody punched me in the face and I'm like, great, I'm just going to leave. Right. You're not going to punch me anymore in the face. And guess what? I left. I didn't acknowledge it. And I left. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not here anymore. Like, I didn't fight back. There was no reason to. And I didn't look back. I didn't look behind me. And there you go. And that's how I am. And so great. Is there bad blood between me and people? Absolutely. If we're on a stream together and they start acting up, you're damn straight a knife's coming out. and it's just the way it's going to be.
I'm not quite at that level. I definitely have made, I wouldn't even say enemies, but there are people that just don't like, I guess, that I've said.
I have enemies.
I've done what I've done tonight, you know, just sometimes you say things that people are like, we don't want to acknowledge that. I think what we're missing more than anything, particularly in the creative realm, with comic book creators personally, I've noticed that there's no humbleness and that everybody thinks that they're somebody and that they're somebody important. But like, I'm going to say something that people aren't really going to not like. Neil Gaiman is not Neil Gaiman because he wrote comic books. Neil Gaiman is Neil Gaiman because he's a writer and wrote novels that got turned into comic books. Like, let's be real here. We're writing comic books. We're having fun doing it. It's great. It's a fun medium. It's fantastic. But none of us are putting up intense novels and in thought-provoking pieces. And, it's just get some humbleness because this is comic books, people. It's just comics.
I'll be very honest. I mean, my ego is checked at the door. But if I don't want to check my ego, everything that I've done, and the fact that I legitimately have figured out the formula and growing a business that will probably be $1 million business in the next 10 years, easy, right. I can easily not check my ego at the door. But I check my ego at the door because, again, I'm in business. This has nothing to do with that. And when I do $1 million in sales, I'm going to let everybody know I did $1 million in sales, and that's that. But all of a sudden, my reputation is going to be like, great, he built a business from $1,000 all the way to $1 million. And people are going to be like, Andrew's not Andrew because he sells comic books or collectibles. He's Andrew and his ego because he built a business from nothing.
Well, and that's how I'm looking at it from the comic book standpoint. Is I'm not insulting. Like, what I just said was not to be an insult to anybody that's a comic book creator, because I love this medium and I love what I get to do in it. But what my reality is at some point, if people know me for writing prose books more than they know me ever in comic books, I'm fine with that. That's what successful looks like to me, is like just being able to get content out.
Oh, I mean, for me, success is the idea of, are you profitable? Are you on time? Well, are you putting out a good product? Is your product relevant 3 years from now? Because let's be realistic, how many comic books are going to be relevant today? It's 3 years later. I mean, I have content that I put out 9 years ago that is still relevant.
Yeah.
Like that's impressive. In today's world, I have interviews that are still relevant, that are still watched heavily every year because people are like from 9 years ago.
But that's what I feel like a danger of comic books is in itself, is it should fit into the time, because it is artistic medium and it's fused with writing. Whereas prose and books, they're outside of time because, again, my name on here is The Count of Monte Cristo. That's a book from the 1700s. I mean,
I'll counter you on that, and I'll make a fair argument. I think Stuck Rubber Baby, which is Howard Cruz, rest in peace, Howard Cruz, about a gay man having a kid in Alabama during the civil rights movement when he was 1920, and how he's coming into being gay, being a father, and watching the civil rights movement happen in Alabama is more relevant now than ever in certain ways.
Is that a graphic novel?
It's a graphic novel. It's one of the best graphic novels ever.
So but what that's the difference. Is a graphic novel is a novel. It's just it's a imagized novel. Whereas the comic books that we're putting out, they're not graphic novels. They're not the same medium. And I think that creators could probably take a moment to realize that they're not the same thing. That's why Tilt 1 through 4, it's a trade, because it's collecting 4 issues of a book. Whereas these graphic novels, like the one you just mentioned, I mean, those are specifically written to be a certain thing.
Fair enough. I'll take the L. I'll take the L.
No, I'm just a thought experiment. It's still
all right. I'll take the L. I'm okay with this. Oh, look at the time. We got to go, guys.
No, really. What time is it? Oh, it's 8:30. All right. I don't know. Did we break the world yet? Did we answer all the world? Did we answer all the world problems?
No. It's a fair counter. It's a fair counter. Obviously, I'm being playful, but
me too. I just want humbleness. I just want to see people be a little bit more humble and not act like everything you put out is just the best thing that's ever happened.
I'm going to ask you a question. How many perfect interviews do you think I've done in 10 years? Just curiosity. Just throw.
I have no idea.
Take a guess.
All right. Repeat the question so I can really think it through.
So you talk about humbleness. How many perfect interviews do you think I've done in the almost 10 years I've been interviewing, almost 650 plus interviews.
Probably none.
One.
One perfect interview.
One perfect interview.
What is a perfect interview?
Just every note was hit perfectly on his end and my end. There was no gaps, and it just flowed completely. And it is a different experience. Like if you ever listen to a perfect song, it was like a perfect song where 50 minutes felt like 3 minutes. It felt, if the interview felt like 3 minutes, if you're like, that's 50 minutes, and I'm like, this thing was perfect. And for whatever reason, it flowed, because every point I wanted to hit just flowed right into the next question.
Yeah.
No gaps. That doesn't mean there aren't other great interviews, but they are not perfect.
Right.
That interview was perfect, where all the dead space was everything that was needed. I mean, and it's a very complicated thing, but 650 interviews, one, only one. And for whatever reason,
at least you got one though.
And I think I've done some great interviews, and we talk about humbleness. The fact that I have one, and I don't know if I will ever get another one, and it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with my guest. Sometimes it just it just worked.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, he was there and I was there, and the wavelengths were right, perfectly in sync. It's a very weird thing, and I can't explain it, and it freaks me out. Like I listen to it, it freaks me out. It's perfect. It's 50 minutes of perfection. And I don't know how to explain that, and it sounds egotistical, but it only happened once.
Right.
So I mean, and again, I would imagine that if a writer gets a perfect chapter in a book where everything, and I mean everything, just flowed on the first flow.
I mean, and it definitely can happen. There's a script that I still haven't had developed into anything yet that it all came out at one time. Like I sat down and it was it. It was a 22, 24 page script that I was like, this is everything that I wanted it to be. Even going back and doing edits, like the only edits I did were grammar and spelling. If I missed anything, there were no changes to the script, because I was just like, man, this freaking is exactly the vision that I had in my head. I mean, everybody needs to find those moments, but like by no means did that make me feel like I've achieved something, like I'm some fantastic writer,
No, same thing with me as an interviewer.
Right.
I was just ecstatic, because I'm like, this wrestler is doing me a favor, and I'm glad I delivered a perfect interview.
Well, the flip side of it is like when you get the one thing, like with the script or with your interview, then it's like everything else after that's like, oh, I didn't do it again.
No, see, for me, it's the template.
Yeah.
For me, I wouldn't say it's the opposite, but it's the template, right? So it's saying, hey, this is the standard now, and this is what this looks like. So this is how it has to flow, and how did I make this work?
Right.
I basically got out of work a few minutes early. My dog was quiet. Like everything was just aligned. Like she was like asleep, and she was perfect. She was just sitting by my feet. She wasn't flipping out, and she wasn't snoring. She was just quietly asleep. Like everything was just working. And I poured myself like a perfect little bit amount of alcohol that just chilled me out perfectly. Had my drink and was sipping it, and it was perfect. And even my sipping when he was speaking was perfect, and just the whole timing and the presentation, but again, it basically shows me how this is supposed to work.
Right.
And then I can go and use that and say, cool, this is how a perfect interview looks. And then when I want to showcase an interview to somebody to get on my show, I send them that one.
Right. Yeah.
It is weird. It's my best tool, and it was perfect because it ended the year for me as far as my show, which was great too. It was like a perfect end. It was everything I wanted for the end of a season.
Fantastic.
I know,
what's
right?
Left?
Isn't it?
What's left? I don't know.
No. What's next is that I'm not done yet.
No, I meant for this interview.
Oh! I was going to allow you to.
I was trying to give you a big a high note.
Well, no. We got all that out of the way. We're gonna go through a bunch of creators. No. We're not going through a bunch of creators.
No.
I don't like to shit on creators if it's unnecessary.
No.
So except that guy, Tyrone, he's got to go. Can't take him anymore.
Freaking
Him and his Soulverse universe, just they go back to their freaking Temple High for all I
That's
care.
right.
I was just speaking to him too, oddly enough, in chat.
Me too.
So, I can't wait to have him back on when maybe September, because that's like a 3-hour interview.
Yeah, always. We need to do one with like all three of us. Just see what would happen.
We'll bring him on. We'll bring who is he working on his show that I was just speaking with today, who puts up really good Instagram videos
that he has on his show.
His co-host.
Oh, Scorpio.
Yeah. We need to get him on. We need to bring Mutant Glue on. Do you know Mutant Glue?
Yep.
She's been on. She's great.
Yeah.
And then who else could I bring on that would be really interesting to bring on?
I mean, he has a good crew of people.
Maybe I'll bring on one of my business partners, DJ Croft. So I brought in a male cosplayer for my Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
Purposely, because I'm so sick of female cosplayers getting on all these Kickstarters that if I ever run another one, I will only bring in male cosplayers.
Well, I mean, again, that's like the Tilt stuff where it's just like all these comic books are so sexualized women, but what if we beef kicked a guy,
I believe in discrimination to the fullest on that one. I will bring in, DJ's a jacked guy.
Yeah.
Crazy thing is DJ's black and he's gay. Mm-hmm. So but that didn't have any impact on me. I don't give a shit. DJ's a
right.
So get this. I asked a bunch of male cosplayers. DJ was the only one like, yeah, I'll do it. And none of the others answered. I'm like, how do you guys expect to get ground in cosplay if you're not willing to do interviews or participate in something like this?
Again, it's the same way with like posting to try to find podcasts to go on. It's just, wow. I know so many people that have podcasts and they just don't respond.
It's crazy. I invite everybody who has a podcast on my show. They don't reciprocate. I'm like, fine. Yeah. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens when this goes around and around and around, because life's a big circle and it's only a matter of time. Because I don't know if you're a wrestling fan, but The Undertaker said it best. The toes you step on are connected to the asses that you will kiss on the way back down. It's a great saying, right?
Yep.
Because it's true. It's true. And I know so many people now who need interviews who can't get shit. And they're not getting it from me. So there you go. I hate to end on such a negative note.
I know.
So it'll allow you to actively self-promote yourself before we get out of here.
Sure. So the next big thing, I guess, for me is the Tilt campaign coming out. That is a full trade. It's a 128-page trade. It's got special bonus content that people haven't seen before. And it's got the core story, and even the advertisements that are breaking up the chapters are specialized because it's a fourth wall breaker. So anyway, that's pretty awesome. We're going to have some really cool rewards. I mentioned earlier the Smash VW buggy. We also have a WWTD, or What Would Tilt Do, shirt and wristband. And so we try to bring you guys really into the world. So there's that. And then the other big thing is aarondowen.substack.com, where I talk about creators' mental health, and I just have other random writings, as well as there's 12 entries into a story called Parallelium. And basically what I did was I took a spreadsheet and I wrote 12 titles, and then I based them all into one little universe and told an ongoing story, and I tried to keep it around 500 words per post. That is turning into a full novel. I've been taking all of that of what I wrote and trying to fix it and then expand it. So that'll be coming out someday. I don't know. Look for my name places because there's stuff going on.
Well, I'm just going to say it, and it's very simple, is that if you like what you see, and especially in comics or pop culture, you need to go support it, whether that means that is on Kickstarter, in your bookstore, Indiegogo, Crowdfunder, Zoop, Fund My Indie, Luke Stone's project, which is pretty cool. You need to go support it, or if it's just on somebody's website, you should go buy it, because without buying things and without financial support, stuff doesn't get made, or it doesn't get made fast enough. And so that's very important at this point Furthermore, supporting people on social media goes a long way. Following people on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads now, super, super important in a lot of ways. It could be just as important as financially supporting people, subscribing on Substacks as well, and just engaging with people in many ways too goes a long way. And as far as I'm concerned, everything that I do, I am Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Pop Anime Comics on YouTube. You can go find me on TikTok at Pop Anime Comics. And I post content every day. So every week you're gonna get anywhere from 20 to 25 videos on YouTube. You can find me on Rumble, on Pop Anime Comics as well. So yeah, I post a lot of content out there. So if you're looking for interviews, looking for micro content, shorts, you name it, I got you covered. Also, I sell a lot of really cool books on eBay. So if you're into the bad girl art stuff or some like pop culture stuff, such as this awesome Princess Peach, which I do not have anymore, but I have books like it. You could definitely go on to my eBay. The link is in the description down below, and I ship perfectly. And I guarantee you that if you're into that stuff, and really hard to find books that sell out, I got you covered. So that's everything that I got. I appreciate everybody checking me out and all that fun stuff. I also have Buy Me a Coffee, which is sort of not working, but you could buy me a coffee if you would like to. Anybody can do it. It's totally up to you or not. It's totally fine. But yeah, that's everything I got. And on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Go read comics.
Perfect. I think that is perfect, everybody. And that is a wrap.